So digital labeling actually becomes more closer to our daily life only after the 1970s, whereby the retailer, pharmaceutical, and the automotive industries began to assign the products with unique universal product codes or UPC for easier inventory management and supply chain management. And up until the 1990s, the barcodes in the form of one-dimensional code. And I actually have a real example over here as well. You might be already very familiar with this. Yeah, this kind of one-dimensional barcode has been assigned to almost every single product that we can see in our daily life. And in the more recent years, we see that digital labeling has become also an additional channel for product information, marketing campaigns, and other consumer engagement activities applied by the industry. And at the same time, the form of two-dimensional barcodes have started being applied to actually overcome the limitation of the one-dimensional barcodes because of certain limitations in terms of the low data storage power as well as the vulnerability in terms of the damage of the code itself. And that are also the form of 2D barcode is actually also more commonly known as QR code, as you can see over here. Yep. So on the next slide, here are some use cases of digital labeling that are becoming more and more popular in the recent years. And these kind of trends include for comprehensive product information to overcome the space limit on the physical product itself, and also to assist on the regulatory compliance. And this has also become a very interesting trend that we have observed in the recent years, whereby the regulators around the world and in Asia are looking into digital label as a potential solution to help complement the food labeling compliance. And several other cases also include for product origin, traceability and authentication, as well as for consumer engagement in terms of sustainability and changing consumers' behavior. And finally, for more comprehensive nutrition evaluation so that consumers can get more access to the nutritional benefits and assessment data on the online space. Yeah. And on the next slide, please. Here, we would like to share with you on the very recent consumer pulse survey that FIA has conducted earlier this year. So in the survey that is conducted throughout 10 countries in the Asia region, we ask consumers questions about their perception on food labeling as well as the potential of digital labeling in terms of what the opportunities and challenges that they face. And in our study findings, we found that around 80% of the consumers think that food product information is very important for them. However, they have been facing with certain challenges when it comes to the printed labels on the physical food product. And this often includes the challenges with the product information in the foreign language, and also in terms of the very small font size, and also some consumers feedback that they are actually not able to find the kind of information they want on the food product. So on the next slide, we see that digital labeling has the potential to help overcome some of the common challenges faced with the traditional physical label. And when we ask consumers about their perception on digital label, and that what is very positive to us is that more than 80% of the Asian consumers are willing or extremely willing to use digital labeling as the new way of communicating product information to them. And this trend is especially higher in countries like Vietnam, India, and the Philippines. On the next slide, I will stop here actually to introduce you to our invited speaker, Mr. Swee from AlphaBeta, who is also a partner that have worked with FIA in the digital labeling study recently. Mr. Swee is the senior manager from AlphaBeta, a Singapore-based practice under Access Partnership. He has the expertise in technology and sustainability-related issues and has worked on a wide range of topics, including sustainable packaging and food waste. Welcome, Wei.
Thank you, Yifan. Right. Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Right. Glad you can join us today. Today, I'm going to just bring you through some of the key findings of a report that Food Industry Asia will release after this webinar, where it looks into the digital labeling landscape and some of the recommendation to move forward. So I'll just go through very quickly and save the bulk of the time for that very interesting panel later. So if you look into this Asia landscape, there are 6 key trends that are driving the adoption of digital labeling. And we have 3 over here. The first one is the demand for greater transparency, right? You see that 70% of consumers in Asia demand for greater transparency to know where their food products are from, how are they grown, how are they transported, etc. Right? So there's really a big push for greater transparency along the supply chain. The second one is greater complexity in supply chain management and traceability. Right, we do see that the supply chain has been spread across different countries. Is pretty long. Right, so really, when you want to recall contaminated food or other kinds of problematic issues, right, it will be even more increasingly important to have a clear understanding of where are they from and who to tackle. The third one is the growing food safety concerns, right? So there's a spike in the different kinds of counterfeit food products and food fraud, and perhaps one way to, as different pilots are being shown on how do you create immutable kind of digital label to ensure that these products are actually what they are, and different people could not really contaminate or alter them. Next slide. So we have 3 other sort of trends here. The first one is the increasing focus on making sustainable food choices. We see that 90% of Vietnamese consumer indicate that they are willing to look at the labels for sustainable packaging, sustainable products, sustainable production, and are willing to pay more. And so really that the global trend of looking for sustainable food products. The fifth one is the lack of harmonization of food labeling requirements, right? So there's a range of food regulations globally, and firms are finding it challenging to alter and to customize to each different markets. So digital labeling do provide a benefit of enabling them to include all the different information while still customizing to the different country requirements. And the sixth one is we see a growing number of food retailers transiting to QR codes, right, or digital labeling, right? And we see that this could also transition conversations with regulators to understand what's next, right? We see firms like Nestle, like Walmart are part of the IBM Food Trust, right? Really where they look into enhancing food traceability through technology. Next. So AlphaBeta, through the report, you'll see more details in the report once it's launched. When you look into the SWOT analysis of implementing digital labeling in Asia, we see that digital labeling has significant strengths and opportunities, but there are also weaknesses and threats which you need to deal with. So let me just talk very quickly some of the key ones. So of course, strengths, you see faster response, right? Information can be accessed readily and businesses can respond to regular demand swiftly, right? To facilitate more efficient food recall, right? We see the ability to include more information, right? On different kinds of brand opportunities, brand products as well. And on the opportunity side, we do see the avenue to collect consumer insights, right? So there are different use cases in Australia and New Zealand where businesses are able to collect aggregated data to make sense of a consumer's profile, consumer's behavior, build consumer relationship, and even facilitate public health initiative. And a new way of engaging consumers, right? There's a lot of information that is important for the consumer, but perhaps, as Yifan mentioned, there's a lot of too much information at once, or perhaps they do not know where to look out for, right? Other information that they included in digital labels are things like recycling, right? How to recycle right, food safety, nutrition, education, etc. And these are able to put into much larger space. But also noting that there are different kinds of weaknesses, right? Let us talk through some of them. So one, like any technology, you will exclude digitally disconnected consumers, right? It requires a handheld device. It requires a specific device to read some of this digital labeling. And then if certain groups, population in society do not have them, right, they will be disadvantaged. But we do see that the trend throughout COVID-19, where there's a uptake of smartphone penetration of devices, right, because of the need to do contact tracing, to spread information, right? So hence, and different kinds of supermarkets are able to have fixed permanent kind of barcode scanners to help consumers as well. Another weakness is ease of imitation, right? QR codes are easy to replicate, right? Which might incentivize food fraud, etc. Right? So the loopholes where different people could access. On the threat, right? You do see that there is potential misinformation from producers, right? Because digital labeling regulations are still a very nascent space, and without proper and clear guidelines, there could be no incentive for producers to put out all the information, right? As they might conflict with branding and marketing interests, right? So there's a potential risk, and also the resistance of regulators towards digital adoption, right? We do see that it might have the inertia to amend existing regulation and the lack of capabilities to enforce compliance, right? The skill to conduct audits of digital label. So all this needs to be thought through, and how do you continue to make digital labeling accessible to all, and also the compliance and enforcement angle. Next. So we put together a sort of an index to look into the digital labeling landscape in Asia and how ready it is. So we call it the Readiness Index, right? Where you look into 10 enablers that can determine whether the country is ready or not, right? And there are 3 buckets here. The first one is digital awareness and public demand, right? So this looks into 3 enablers: one, high level of digital awareness and sophistication by both by companies, by consumers, by the regulators, right? How digital savvy are them in general. The second one is the strong consumer demand for information about food products, where we often see that consumer preference and interest push a main driver for industry efforts and action, right? So whether they do really want digital labeling, right? Whether they are aware, whether they use them or not. And the third one is the high smartphone penetration rate, right? To mainstream digital labeling systems, right? You need to have such smartphone devices, such handheld devices to read them. The next bucket is your regulations and regulatory capacity, right? The first one is the presence of existing regulations on food labeling, right? Whether there's even labeling of food, right? In which most countries will have a sort of thought through some of this, quite advanced in the thinking. The second one is the presence of digital labeling regulation, right? As I said earlier on, without clear regulations in this space, there could be different loopholes that could be exploited. The third one is the strength of data protection laws and enforcement mechanism, right? So one of the risks, because it's data, right, recorded in digital labels, there could be different kinds of misinformation or using of personal data, right? The installation of cookies, right, through the systems, right? So how do you prevent misuse of personal data? And the fourth one is the presence of strong supervisory mechanism. How do you ensure compliance enforcement, right? How do you do audits, right? And how ready are the different regulators prepared for this new space? And then the third bucket is the partnership and collaboration, right? As we all know, that pushing out digital labeling or any kinds of a new system out there really requires the partnership across the supply chain, across stakeholders. And the first one is a strong partnership between supply chain partners and regulators, right? To align on regulatory requirements, co-design different solutions, and implement the solution, and also resolve implementation challenges, right? So how do we do that? On the ninth one, strong collaboration between across relevant government units, right? Food issues cut across several different government departments, including food safety, customs, consumer protection agencies. How do we streamline them, and whether the country has a sort of dedicated agency to spearhead this? And the last sort of enabler, where we look into test the readiness of digital labeling, we see the participation in international and regional forums on harmonizing food labeling standards, right? So one of the opportunities where digital labeling could come in, right? Because there's a lot of talks on harmonization of labels, food labels, but perhaps there's not really a strong push or a good solution where digital labeling could provide that, right? Because it provides a space to include more information, but also the ability to customize to each market. So how do we maximize the benefit of digital labeling system with sort of consistent labeling across as many markets? Next. So in the report, we constructed a 3x3 matrix, right? So you look into the horizontal axis, this is the performance around the key enabling factors, right? The 10 enablers, what we have just now, right? We go through a systematic way of testing each of these 10 markets across these 10 enablers, and we rate them across a high, moderate, and low, right? Depending on where they are, how they score across the 10 enablers. And on the vertical axis, we do have the deployment of digital labeling for food, right? So this looks into the presence of use cases and pilots, right? Whether they're in high, there's some element or some degree of digital labeling regulations. There are some pilots being done in a widespread amongst food categories, right? In the moderate, there are some use cases, there are some pilots, there are some large scale events, but for low, there is a limited kinds of record of different pilots. And you will see that there are two main groups of countries, right? If you look into the middle block on the moderate, right, you see a few of them who has already started off with pilots, started off with trials. But when you look at the enablers, they are at the moderate, right? So really is to how do they ensure a sustainable digital labeling, a pilot or even a rollout, mainstreaming the rollout, right? What really is to look into the enablers. How do they increase, have more robust implementation through improved enforcement capabilities, as well as technology infrastructure. And there's another group of countries, right, which is in the moderate high, right, the 4 countries over there, right, where they do have a strong set of enablers to roll out different pilots to test digital labeling use cases, and they should start implementing different pilots to get the ball rolling, to collect data, to able to evaluate the long-term kind of plan. Right, so hopefully this gives us a snapshot on the baseline in 2022, right, where we are now, and hopefully with more conversations, with more initiative down the road, we're able to evaluate where the different countries stand in a few years' time. Over back to you, Yifan.
Thank you very much, Cheng. And on the next slide, this is something to actually conclude the insights that we have gathered in the study. So this is really a kind of calling for action to the stakeholders on what we can do about digital labeling going forward. So what essentially FIA is trying to advocate for is not really implementing digital labeling for the sake of doing it, but rather to see how we could potentially embrace digital labeling as the technological solution to help us to overcome some of the challenges that we have been facing for a long time in terms of labeling compliance, supply chain challenges, but also using it as an opportunity to better engage our consumers and the society. So hereby, we're thinking that in terms of the what industry and regulators can do, right? It includes in terms of thinking about testing out some pilot program to see how we can use digital labeling to help address some of the challenges. For example, in the cases that we have studied, that includes like using a QR code to educate consumers on a website on how to recycle better the product packaging waste. Yeah, and other recommendations also include promoting multi-stakeholder collaborations and also launch consumers awareness programs to engage better with the consumers. And that also for the regulators, how we can also work strongly between the regulatory agencies and the industry to develop an enabling environment to support digital labeling development, and also to facilitate the regional or international harmonization when it comes to the technical aspects of digital labeling. Yep. So now we will be moving on to a panel discussion. And at this juncture, I would like to invite our distinguished panelists to join the panel by turning on your camera. So let me do an introduction to each of the panelists to the audience over here. We have Mr. Patrik Jonasson, who is the Global Head of Retail at GS1 and Senior Director for Public Policy in GS1 Asia Pacific. He manages GS1's Global Retail Program and the APAC Regional Government Affairs and External Collaborations. GS1, to some of you who might not be aware yet, is the international standard setting body for barcoding, product identification, and data sharing, covering around 25 sectors globally across about 150 countries. And we also have invited Mr. Charoen Kaowsuksal, who is the chairman for Food Processing Industry Club of the Federation of Thai Industry and the senior advisor of the executive officer of CPRAM. He has the expertise in food manufacturing, logistics, and the global management system to lead the business of CPRAM in Thailand. And we also have Mr. Nuthasit Ungphakorn, who is also from CPRAM and is the general manager and is responsible for all communities around food manufacturing. And he is also an expert in food standards and total quality management. Welcome our panelists, and also not to forget Cheng, who is part of the panel as well. And to the audience on the call, feel free to start typing in your question to any of the speakers or panelists on the call. You can just do it simply by typing your question in the chat box. And that during the session, I will be picking up your question and direct it to the respective experts. So I would like to start my first question to the panel here. In terms of your response to the trends that Cheng has mentioned earlier in his presentation, whereby he mentioned about the 6 key driving factors and trends to advance digital labeling in Asia. Yeah, so I want to hear from our expert panel's views on is there any particular trend that you feel most strongly about? Yeah, and that also, is there anything else that you would like to mention? So let me start with Patrik.
Thanks, Yifan. Can I just also add that if you're writing any questions in the chat to me, make sure they're easy questions, yeah? Okay, good. Thank you. One of the key trends or things that are moving that I would like to maybe highlight more than others in this first segment is the role that regulators potentially will play in this space. So regulators will definitely see the potential of leveraging these two-dimensional barcodes to make sure that we can give better information to consumers as well as to regulators in their day-to-day operations, for example, related to market surveillance in their domestic markets or in border checks, etc. So I think that this will emerge as an issue quite quickly, and we as industry led by FIA and the local industry groups in the different markets such as Federation of Thai Industries, we need to make sure that we are having an ongoing and active dialogue with the regulators on this topic from the start to make sure that we are all aligned when it comes to the industry implementation of digital labeling and when it comes to the requirements from the different regulators in ASEAN as well as the wider Asian region. So from my point of view, I think that's a very important thing to focus on, and I'm confident that FIA will take a leadership role in this discussion, and I know that you're already engaged with ASEAN and APEC on a range of topics, and I do believe that this is something that you should also monitor, but also be a thought leader in going forward. So that would be my area to highlight for now. Thank you, Yifan.
Yeah, thank you very much, Patrik, for highlighting about the topic on the regulatory movement and the need for the industry regulators to work towards the same direction, right? Because both sector can be the driver for this trend, but we need to make sure we are aligned and harmonized in terms of the direction to enhance the best efficiency. Also, thank you for your faith in FIA in helping to lead on this area. Yep. So let me go to what Kun Charoen to share with us if you have any additional perspective about the driving trends. Do you have some other thoughts besides the regulatory trend?
Yep. Good afternoon. The challenge is right from the regulation and I think is from the food safety because of the customer we have here right now. They would like to know the sort of food safety from the raw material and supply chain. So in Asia Pacific right now is very change rapidly for the fresh food, especially in the convenience store and supermarket. people they would like to know the story and the food safety from the supply chain, raw material, everything to prove this is right to consume. Yeah. So otherwise, from the regulatory in every country in APEC, I think also in Thailand is very very important for this system because in food supply chain is very important so much because right now is Thailand is the big one of the food producer in the world. So this digital labeling is very suit for our business right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kun Charoen, for sharing about another driving trends when it comes to food safety and the consumers' demands on transparency of the food product. And my next question is still to you, Kun Charoen. So besides food safety, we also see that in the recent years, food sustainability is becoming a more emerging trend globally in our region as well. So do you think that the digital labeling could also have some role to play to help industry to actually, when it comes to like consumer communication or supply chain management, to actually help facilitate the industry to move towards a more sustainable future? How do you think about the potential of digital labeling in this space?
Also, is the data on the digital labeling is it's to track back on parties in a supply chain, the food standard and also digital labeling could best fit adopt for the data transfer between the company in the supply chain, reduce mistake, could it recall product and could cause of hang loss on profit and increase the unnecessary waste and also carbon footprint because when we recall product, when we mistake and then we recall product from the supermarket or the convenience store is very volume a lot so much. So this is the reject product to be the cause of carbon footprint also. So this digital labeling can help to traceability product and the store they know what is the expiry date of product, so they can protect at the first. And that's also digital labeling can help the environment because we can reduce the digital bar to very small, and then we put any information, more information in the digital labeling. So this helps so much. Just start in Thailand is right now is popular to the producer. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Kun Charoen, for sharing your perspective on the sustainability angle, but also you brought up about another very important feature of digital labeling in terms of its power stored much more information, right, than the physical labeling itself. So my next question would be to Cheng or any other panelists can feel free to jump in as well. How do you think digital labeling will evolve in the future when it comes to how does it work together with the physical label? Yeah, do you think the future is for digital label to completely replace with the physical labeling, or they need to actually sort of coexist in some way?
Let me answer.
Yeah, perhaps Cheng you can go first. Yeah, and then we will go to
get the ball
other
rolling. Yeah.
Let me answer this. Yeah.
Yep. So I think there will be a sort of a combination of both, right? So the traditional labeling and digital labeling, right? We do see there are some different companies that are at the forefront of it, right? Trying out different pilots, use cases, right? They're still very nascent, right? But I think in general, there is a sort of acknowledgement of the benefits that it brings, really just to see how does it operate on the ground, right? But there's also a whole host of other implementation challenges that we need to overcome, right? Things like are smaller companies able to do it, right? Able to have the sufficient funding, sufficient technical assistance to bring about the systems, right? Whether they can maintain the database, right? There will be a lot of data, right? But whether they're able to manage this data will be a sort of a secondary sort of concern as well, right? So I think there will be a mixed bag, right? There will be a front runners with sufficient pilots, sufficient scale of it, right? There will be others who are still at the traditional labeling, but I think there is a general there will be a lot more conversations of different pilots and to test it out once there are sufficient data from those earlier pilots, right? And I think there's also a particular group of people who are still maybe using analog kind of system, right? Maybe they will have a leapfrog and to test out different systems since they are now, more willing to try out different newer ones as well, right? I think that is sort of my take on this environment.
Thank you, Cheng, for the very comprehensive and holistic view about how digital labeling will evolve. Taking into the various factors, the enabling factors of it. Yeah. Any other thoughts on this from any panelists so far?
And maybe I share a little bit for physical labeling. I think is outstanding for the consumer readiness. So people get used to and do not need to learn anything more. And for digital labeling, also good for presentation or even multi-language support. So I think both of them will support each other. Physical is mandatory, but digital also for the marketing gimmick. So they can play a lot of things, make it interesting and exciting for consumer. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Nuthasit. About meeting the need of the ever demanding consumers. So my next question is to you, Nuthasit. We know that CPRAM has recently conducted a very successful pilot in implementing digital labeling in your retail environment. So could you share with us your experience with this digital labeling pilot, and have you also gained any consumer insights about how it's actually benefiting your customers and consumers at this stage? Yeah, please go ahead, Nuthasit.
Sorry, I forgot to open my microphone. Maybe can open my PowerPoint. And this is our trial case. So digital labeling is a very interesting issue, and we have some project. That's when we put some data metric or 2D barcode into the package product. So this one we add the product code and expiry date into the 2D barcode. So when consumer come to the 7-Eleven counter at the POS, when they scan, if it expire, they will show some error code. So the shopkeeper cannot sell the expired product. So we can protect 100% no bad product to consumer. And this one actually can add more information for the next page. Sorry. This one for GS1 Thailand also develop some program called Smart Bar. This program can scan 2D barcode and show information on mobile phone. And this one, they have both in Thai language and English language, so it can support many things. And I think this one we can learn and we can test many things. And actually for this one, if we put some HTML code in data metric, so we can do some marketing campaign or do many things with them. So a lot of things can play more. And for getting information from the consumer, actually we have a two way to know customer. The first way is a like traditional way, so we just go to ask and some questionnaire at the shop. But another way, we do some social media monitoring. So we have a program robot. Whoever talk about our company in social media, we get information and we can analyze. So we can adapt them together. Yep.
Thank you very much, Nuthasit, for sharing about the pilot that you are rolling out in Thailand, and also how you're using it to engage with the consumers as well. So I saw that in your case study, the digital code is both being used at your retail store by the point of sales scanner, and also being able to be used by the consumer to scan on the mobile phone, right? So here comes my question to the technical expert over here, right? Because currently we see that on the single product packaging, we often see multiple different like barcode and the QR code being applied at the same time. Do you think technically it's achievable in the future? We can just use one single digital code to store all the information that we need and for multiple purposes, either it's for retail, for supply chain, for regulators, or for consumers. Is it possible, technically achievable? Perhaps Patrik, you can answer that.
Thank you. It's a good question, and the answer is yes. So this is the end goal that we are working together with our industry members towards, where you would only have one barcode, or what we call data carrier, on the packaging. We realize that the product packaging is prime real estate for all companies, and they don't want to have one, two, or they don't want to have two, three, or four, sorry, barcodes on their packaging. Ideally, they would have one barcode that doesn't take up much space. So we are working towards a future together with our more than 2 million industry members, where we are envisioning that there will only be one barcode, a 2D code on the packaging, and this code would be able to link you to all the relevant information that you would like to have, such as information about product freshness, expiry, things like batch lot, but also if you want to cook and you need a recipe, or you want the allergens, or you want the nutrition information, or you want traceability information, you want sustainability certification. We are envisioning that you would be able to access all this data with one scan of the code. Our target date for this is 2027, where we envision that we would be able to reach this. And what will drive this adoption, coming back to the presentation from Thailand, is that we believe that the point of sale scanners being able to scan these 2D codes will drive adoption also among brand owners to put the codes on their packaging. And based on our research, what we are expecting is that you have about 88% of scanners being able to scan 2D codes by 2025. And our vision is that you have all scanners globally being able to do it by 2027. So yes, this is our vision, and we're working very hard together with industry to achieve this. It's not easy work with being a global program, but we do believe that we are on the right track here. Thank you, Yifan.
Thank you very much, Patrik, for sharing with us that insights. Yeah, and it's good to know that this is something that is achievable. And also, we have also heard about the timeline, which is 2027, whereby this can actually become a reality. So I will be looking forward to year 2027. So that means that when we want to put up whatever new information on the product, we don't need to generate a new barcode or QR code, right? We can just use the existing one. Yeah, thanks for that. And My next question is to all the panelists over here. I want to hear from your thoughts about where do you see as the potentially biggest hurdle, for us to advance digital labeling? Is there anything that we need to be aware or careful about? Do you think that kind of resistance in utilizing digital labeling, could it come from the infrastructure in terms of technology itself, or could it come from the consumer's acceptance, or could it come from the kind of like potential data security or data privacy faced by the stakeholders? Where do you see is the biggest threat or potential hurdle that we need to overcome? Can we start by Junwei?
Sure. And give some thoughts before the rest of the speakers. I think there are a few, right, that are areas to consider, right? So consumers, so I think there is a sort of greater acceptance for such tools, right? Especially through the COVID-19 pandemic, right? I think the two sort of challenge I would see is one, the nascency of regulations related to this, right? Digital labeling, data protection, data privacy, etc. Right? How, because such a new space, and in order for it to be mainstream, right, some of these regulations needs to be in place, right? So I guess it's the initial discussions on what are the different kind of regulations needed for a new technology, right, or on mainstream of a current technology, right? So I think it's really that front. How do you set the regulatory piece in place? The second one is I do think is also on the business side, where perhaps there is the lack of awareness, perhaps, on moving towards this sort of mainstreaming of digital labeling, right? It could be due to many reasons, right? So one is the lack of awareness to test different test cases, use cases in a specific country, right? Or it could be the lack of financing or sort of technical capabilities to put something in place, a system in place, right? Or perhaps etc. Right? So I guess it's really the awareness issue. But I guess once the kind of there are use cases and there is a sufficient knowledge, right? Perhaps all this it could be resolved. Right? So I just some thoughts on this, on the challenges.
Thank you, Chenwei. Yeah. How about the rest of the panelists? Anything else you would like to add on your thoughts about the challenges? No. So we have
New, you
Kun
ask,
Charoen.
new, ask something.
Yes.
I also thinking about consumer behavior as well, because we have to sell to all the people. So some people maybe not get used to about the new technology, and they not ready to change. So but now, as Mr. Cheng say already, that from the COVID epidemic, so people get used to about new technology, and now paymenting now is payment by scanning QR code. So they get used to already. So I think now it's time for data metric, I think. Yes.
Yeah. In Thailand right now, for me, the worry about the cyber security, because on the POS, when customer buy, and then in the convenience store we have like a member. You the number from the member. The member we should be protect the personal data. Yeah, this is I worry about the cyber security, but I think the IT person will have the protector to protect the personal data. Yeah, I worry about the cyber security. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kun Charoen, and pointing about the potential threat of cybersecurity. So, do you think that to overcome this challenge, would the solution more lie within the technology to help overcome this, or is it more required for the kind of stakeholder collaboration to ensure a clear legislative framework to protect the data integrity and data security? Anyone who can answer this? How about Patrik?
No, I mean, I'm sorry, I don't really have an answer to this issues. The regulatory framework for privacy frameworks are evolving in Asia Pacific as we speak, and it's very difficult to comment on this, how it will affect our implementation in the next years ahead. So for us as an organization, I can say the cybersecurity aspect is always priority number one and top of mind when we're implementing these types of solutions together with industry. But I cannot sit here and talk about how I have a solution to the problem, unfortunately. Thank you.
Just want to add a little bit for security. I think for the website that redirect to display information, this one must be SSL secure layer. So this one will be a lot more secure. Should be HTTPS, so will be secure layer.
Thanks, Nuthasit, for providing us with some like technical expertise and the solution to that. And that I also do agree that we may not have a simple solution at this stage, but it's something really that requires multi-stakeholder collaboration for us to continue discuss and find how we can better work together to ensure the data security in this journey. So that leads to my final question. This will be open to all the panelists over here. So my question is that what among the 5 recommendations, for the action items that we have highlighted earlier in the presentation, is there any area that you think that will require more kind of a priority area of attention? And when it comes to the multi-stakeholder collaborations that we have been asking for, is there any also a priority that you think that we should look into? Yeah, and I'd like to open that question from perhaps Cheng first.
Sorry, Yifan, can you go back to the slide so we have an overview of the 5 points, if that's possible?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Here it is.
Thank you.
Right, I can just jump in first. I think, requires, so as I said earlier, if we base it on the 10 enablers, there are actions for the different countries to work on as well, right? But broadly, when you look across these 5, I do think that for the regulators to start thinking about some of these digital labeling regulations, right? Because it is already happening, right? It's already gaining speed, right? And hopefully as more industry comes in, right, there could be greater conversations on the kind of the strength and weakness, risk, etc., on how to mitigate this risk, right? So start, and I think developing some of these enablers, including regulations. On launch, I think pilot programs will be also really important, right? Perhaps if you want to prioritize, there are certain countries that has already the kind of sufficient or robust enablers to start with, right? To fall sort of a front runner in terms of this digital labeling, right? So really is to see how pilots program can be established, right? Even in Thailand, right? There are some pilots as well, right? Gathering of the data, and really the data will help to shift and see whether there's certain products that it will work, some products it doesn't work, right? There are some perhaps environment, a shop, a retail specific store that doesn't work, right? So I really just through the pilot program, right, we're able to find out all these things, right? So I think just these 2 to emphasize if I were to choose among these 5.
Thank you very much, Cheng, and also really like your point about like starting with some pilot, just get it going, and see that how we can leverage based on that, And Charoen, is there anything else you would like to add on as well?
Yeah, also in Thailand, when we start, we launch the pilot program like that because we start not so more recipe. We start like item by item because we think if the pilot program is successful, we will expand in the factory, in a whole line of factory. But we start by some line, something like this, and then we expand to another factory. This is like a successful story, and then we can exchange knowledge together. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Kun Charoen. And how about Kun Nuthasit? Do you agree with your colleague, or do you have anything else you would like to add on as
Yes,
well?
I think definitely pilot program is very important. Actually, first time when we implement the digital labeling on stir fry basil. That one we just put only QR code and it's not dynamic. So it's get boring. And actually on that time, I try to put some code to counter who come to read it. And 1 month later, just only few, 5 or 6 person come to read it. So I think it's not too success on that time. That's when it's about 6 or 7 year time already. And then we change to data metric. That's when we put information and it's dynamic because we printing with the date code and it's very useful because we use with 7-Eleven Thailand. So every pack must be scanned through the data metric to sell. And that one will be the great catalyst for us. And then we expand a lot. Now we have over 90 SKU that implement data metric already. This one actually we get consult with GS1 Thailand and they give us standard. So we use that standard implement between retailer and us. And on that time also have the problem on the inkjet machine as well. So that one we have to do some change and add some program extra to achieve this one. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Kun Nuthasit. Yeah, and I really like when you share about the real hands-on experience on how you have learned, right, through the past failure or success of the digital labeling pilots. Yeah. So finally, how about Patrik? I know that earlier you had also mentioned about the collaboration that would be needed, right, between the regulators and the industry to ensure the alignment. I think that probably speaks to number 4 in the overall action that would be needed. Is there anything else you also feel strongly about?
Yeah, no, of course, that's what I feel strongly about. And we've been discussing this for the last 3 or 4 years, how digital labeling can facilitate harmonization among the ASEAN markets. So that's always been a top priority for me. I think the other point would be the pilot programs also. And this is, of course, something that we currently are working on, but we keep it kind of quiet. We're working in test labs where we are inviting the major scanner manufacturers like Honeywell, Zebra, and others, and testing out their scanning equipment to see what speeds of scan we can achieve at point of sale, what accuracy we can achieve at point of sale, etc. So we're working very closely with the hardware manufacturers to ensure that when this is rolled out globally, we will not have technical hiccups at the point of sale, because that makes people upset when they have to wait in line because the scanning doesn't work. So we are piloting on that level currently. We are very keen to work with brand owners, retailers, and other industry partners to pilot rollouts of limited product categories in selected markets going forward. So I think that will happen within the next 6 to 12 months from our side. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Patrik, for also sharing about the kind of initiative that GS1 has been working on with your partners. Yeah. So thank you very much to other panelists, and that also for the last point, I heard every one of you have mentioned about your enthusiasm about conducting pilots to help us to really test out how digital labeling could become potentially more successful. Yeah, so to all the audience on the call today, if you are interested to explore about any pilot opportunity, feel free to reach out to FIA or GS1 or any of the experts on the call here, and they will be happy to initiate further discussion and help you to facilitate on that journey together with you. Yep. So thank you again for all the panelists for the very enlightening discussion for today's session. So on the last slide over here on the screen, here is a digital code, yeah, where you can access the very recently published FIA report on digital labeling for the future of smarter food labeling in Asia. So this report is just made publicly available today. Yeah, you will be able to access through the code or for the web link over here. But at the same time, we'll be sharing with you the report in the follow-up email to all the audience after the session today. So thank you very much again for joining. Yeah, and wish you have a nice rest of the day. Thank you.